Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this afternoon's meeting of the Audit and Accounts Committee, this Wednesday, the 23rd of July. The County Council does allow filming and photography at its public meetings, so please do feel free to take pictures and to use social media during the meeting, but please do ensure that your phones are set to silent or vibrate while the meeting is taking place. The meeting is being live streamed and a recording will be available to view later on the County Council's website. There isn't any fire alarm test scheduled for this afternoon, so if the alarm sounds, I'll adjourn the meeting and we'll leave by the side doors to my left and we'll use the external staircase to assemble in the car park. Agenda item 1, apologies and declarations of interest. Would the Democratic Services Officer report any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. There are no apologies, and just for your awareness, Emma Duncan, the Monitoring Officer, is available online, and the Independent Co-opted Member, Mohammed Hussain, is also online.
Thank you very much. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest on any matter which relates to today's agenda, please? I see no hands raised. I'm going to make a declaration. We don't need to make declarations in this meeting if we've already declared them on our statutory declaration of interest, which is recorded on the County Council website. But just for good record, I'd like to state that I am a member of the Conduct Committee of the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales, and because of that, I've recused myself from considering any cases which appear at that body relating to our auditors. Right, move on from that to agenda item 2, the minutes from the meeting of the 4th of June 2025 and the minutes action log. The committee is being asked to approve the minutes as an accurate record. Rishenta, sorry.
My apologies, Chair. I understand there's a problem with the sound. Would you mind just pausing briefly while we look into that on the live stream? Thank you.
Thank you, Rishenta. We'll pause the meeting just for a few moments. Thank you. Thank you, Rishenta. Right, so we got to item 2, the minutes of the meeting on the 4th of June 2025. The committee are being asked to approve the minutes as an accurate record. Are there any objections to that, please?
I I see none.
Thank you very much indeed. There are no objections, so I will sign those at the end of the meeting. Thank you very much indeed. Move on to the minutes action log. Do members have any questions or comments on the minutes action log, please? Yes, Councillor Leonardo.
Have all overdue audit recommendations now been actioned? And if yes, when and how was evidence verified?
I think that we do have an agenda item coming up exactly on that subject, and that might be the right point at which to raise it, if you don't mind.
Okay, I'll wait for answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Any other items on the action log? Right. We can move on then to item 3, which is petitions and public questions. And we've received one question this month, and that's from Mr. Andrew Rosen. Mr. Rosen, you have up to 3 minutes. Please do come up to the further desk. You have up to 3 minutes to ask your question. A reminder that public speakers are asked to behave appropriately for the nature of the meeting and show courtesy and respect to everyone present. They must not make any marks which are offensive, defamatory, insulting, or discriminatory. Mr. Rosen.
Thank you, Chair. At last week's full council meeting, the chair of the shareholders subcommittee replied to a written question saying that this Land Limited's detailed balances do not form part of the council's accounting records. The implication was that this land's accounting records and related documents are out of scope for those wishing to inspect the council's draft accounts. That is not what the law says. Section 26 of the Local Audit and Accountability Act 2014 states that during the accounts inspection period, any interested person may inspect the accounting records for the financial year to which the audit relates, and all books, deeds, contracts, bills, vouchers, receipts, and other documents relating to those records, and make copies of all or any part of those records or documents. In his book, Information Rights, Mr. Philip Coppell, KC, wrote, "The courts gave the phrase accounts to be audited a broad meaning so as to include the running record of financial movements that was used to make up the statement of accounts at the end of each financial year. The courts also gave the phrase relating to a broad meaning, requiring only a factual connection between the account in question and not an express reference or mention by one to the other. KPMG's audit of CCC includes the single entity accounts and the consolidated group accounts, which incorporate this land's accounting records. KPMG even sets a separate materiality threshold for the consolidated accounts. This land's draft accounts for 24-25 undoubtedly relate to the council's consolidated group accounts, which form part of the accounting records for the financial year to which the audit relates. The council must hold a copy of this land's complete draft accounts for 24-25 because it is a requirement under paragraph 4.11 of the shareholders' agreement between the council and this land. Those draft accounts and all this land's related accounting records, books, deeds, etc., therefore lie within scope of the public's inspection rights at CCC during the current inspection period. My question is, will this committee, which is charged with governance, give a public assurance that interested parties will not be denied their statutory inspection rights at this authority under Section 26 of the Act? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Rosen. Does any member have any question they'd like to raise on this in clarification before I give an answer? Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Rosen, I'm not quite understanding. Can you clarify exactly what documents or categories of records you're alluding to or have previously requested under your Section 26 rights, and whether the council has provided them in full and on time? Also, moving on from that, after that, are you asking this committee to give public assurance today that full unrestricted access will be granted this year? And are you saying this council has ever delayed or obstructed your access to records during the legally defined inspection period? Because I'm quite not understanding where this is going or where this is coming from.
Thank
Okay.
you, Councillor Ioannidis. That's very helpful. I will give Mr. Rowson the right to reply to that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, yes to pretty well all of the above. In the past, I have had difficulties in getting information about this land. I've asked for the draft accounts every year for the last 3 or 4 years. and been told they're not within scope. 2 years ago, I asked for a PFI contract on the street lighting. I was given 2 pages of a several hundred-page document the first year. Then I was given all the pages, but mostly redacted. And last year, when I asked again, I was told that legal was looking into it and they would get back to me soon. And that was 12 months ago. So yes, this year I'm particularly concerned with this land, which is, quite high profile now, and the accounting records surrounding the arrangements for the loan, which presumably have to be mirrored in this land's accounts and the council's accounts, and this land's draft accounts form part of that.
Councillor Ioannidis? Yep.
I just got a couple of follow-ups on that then. So what are you suggesting? Do you believe the council's treatment of certain financial decisions is now in urgent public scrutiny? It is in need of urgent public scrutiny. Because if you're unable to get the records under your rights, then I'm not quite understanding what's happening within council. I mean, you surely should have been able to get them documents, no?
I'm not sure how Mr. Rowson can answer that, but do you want to just respond to that?
Yes, thank you. I'm not making any casting any aspersions, except possibly that there is a difference in understanding of what Section 26 says. Now, the purpose of Section 26, which I think I put in an email that you may have received, is for interested parties and local electors in particular to assist the auditor in their audit, which does cover the consolidated accounts. And also it's part of representative democracy if we want to make an objection to the accounts. But the statutory auditor cannot have a look at absolutely everything. And the law says that, or implies that people who may have local knowledge have a chance to share that with the auditor and assist the auditor in their work. There's a quote here from a previous landmark case which talks about the public being the helpers to the auditors. So that is our role, and we can't do that if we don't have the information, or if it arrives weeks or months after the deadline, which this year is the 11th of August.
Thank you, Mr. Rowson. Councillor Ioannidis, is that sufficient at this time before I give an answer?
Just one more question then on that, Chair. So are you therefore suggesting that as you've been unable to get some of these key financial documents, then the accounts themselves, the governance statement, and the risk register, they're losing credibility? Is that what's being suggested here?
Well, I'm not going to, I won't have words put in my mouth, but I'll give you an example. In this land's draft accounts and final accounts in recent years, there is a figure in the main income and expenditure, which is admin expenses, and it's usually somewhere above £4 million. And there's a note attached. And when you look at the note further down, it should give you a breakdown of everything that makes up that total. But every year it says admin expenses include the following, and it gives 3 or 4 or 5 categories. But those categories, when you add them up, fall short of the total by up to £2.2 million. And 2 years ago, I submitted an FOI to this land and asked for a breakdown of the missing numbers, and they included audit fees, either 25,000 or 125,000, that had not been published in the main accounts, or we couldn't see them in the main accounts. So there were gaps there. And so what I'm looking for is for completeness.
Thank you, Mr.
I hope
Rowson.
that
That's much
answers.
appreciated. Thank you. Fine, thank you very much indeed. Right, well, thank you very much indeed, first of all, for the notice of your question, Mr. Rowson. And let's give a very simple and straightforward answer to start off with, and that is that you and any other interested parties will not be denied your statutory inspection rights under Section 26 of the Local Audit and Accountability Act 2014 in relation to the audit of the council's accounts. That's just a statement of fact that you've got every right to have that information. And if you do not receive that information within a reasonable amount of time, and we'll come to timing in a second, if there is any problem with the information that you're receiving, or you're not receiving something you've specifically asked for, I'd like you to contact me personally as quickly as possible for me to investigate. However, let's be quite clear. The statutory right does relate to the council's accounts and the council's accounting records. They don't relate to other bodies, which may be part of the group accounts of the council. They only apply to the council's accounting records. That's the legal advice that I've been given from officers. I'm not in a position to doubt what they're saying, and I would say that as far as the council is concerned, that's the position that we're going to have. As far as timing is concerned, you mentioned having delays of weeks and months, and that clearly is not satisfactory in the sense of your or any other interested party being able to make, first of all, investigation, and secondly, to make any representation concerning the information which is requested by them. What I did ask officers is to ensure that you are given the information. You've asked for a very large amount of information, and I suggested to officers that they give that to you in tranches so that you at least can make a start on part of the information, only to be told that that's exactly what has been done in previous years, and you have been given the information in tranches rather than all at once. And I'm told that the first tranche would be given to you no more than 10 days after the start of the process. There are cases where it is a legal obligation upon the council to redact some of the information which is within the accounting records. And again, if you have any objection to any part of that, I'll be interested to hear what you have to say. But generally, those redactions are for good legal reasons, and nothing should be redacted by the council which can't be openly available to any member of the public to see. I think that concludes everything. Oh, sorry. You'd care to have a word, Mr. Hudson, as a Section 151 officer?
Chair, thank you. If I may, and just come back on some of the questions and the statement, just want to clarify, as an external auditor, I declare, it worked for KPMG. Indeed, I'm fully aware of the statute provisions. I've been a Section 151 officer now for over 20 years, and have always carried that grounding of external audit with me. So I would just like to clarify that we would never and do not withhold any information from our external auditors, and external auditors are able to access any information, and we do actually provide information to them and have a very good working relationship because of the culture and my background. I would say that in previous years, we feel we have complied with the position in terms of the statutory requirement. There is, as Chair, you've just made notice, a difference between what accounts are actually available to inspection and the timing difference between our compilation of accounts and what we have to use, therefore, for the group accounts. As Mr. Rowson has rightly said, he FOI'd, which is correct position to do. The company, as and when we get the information, we will clearly review the statement of accounts from this land. This land publish their statement of accounts. They are audited. They are registered with Companies House. They are freely available. And I am aware of the Freedom of Information request that was sent to Mr. Rowson previously that covered all of the information that was requested. We will continue to work in the open and transparent way that we have done, and I'm very proud of my team for that behaviour. It is my professional judgment that judges the accounts, my professional challenge to the statement of accounts in terms of what is produced in compliance with the policy. It is me that an external audit hold to account in terms of that position, as they will rightly say. I sign off the statement of accounts. We will come to the item. I think councillors will see a very detailed report, which I'm incredibly grateful to my team sitting at the back, who will take us through the complex transactions. And I think we've been very open in that report. But I just wanted to make that clear. We will absolutely, Chair, as you say, comply with the statutory requirements. And I know the monitoring officer likewise.
That is very much appreciated. Thank you, Mr. Hudson. Emma, as our monitoring officer, do you have any comment to make, please?
Thank you, Councillor Bowden. Good afternoon, members. For those who aren't familiar with my role, I ensure that the Council complies with all legal obligations that it has, including those regarding information management. I have been aware of numerous requests by Mr. Rowson under various pieces of legislation. As we always do with all requests, those are moderated. We take legal advice where necessary to ensure that people's rights are being respected and the Council is being transparent in what it discloses. As has been referred to earlier, there are some occasions where information is redacted for very good legal reasons, either to protect personal data or to protect commercial confidentiality. But I haven't seen any evidence in the time that I've been with the authority that Mr. Rowson hasn't been given everything that he is able to see. There are also independent appeal processes available outside that to the Information Commissioner, certainly under FOIR. And obviously that gives us a check and balance to ensure that we're acting correctly as well. But just as the monitoring officer wanted to reassure members that there isn't any evidence that I've seen that the Council has acted unlawfully in terms of what it's produced. And that has been backed up as well in terms of the external audit. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. That's extremely helpful. I hope, Mr. Rowson, that will satisfy you that we have the intention of fulfilling the legal requirements. I have that additional assurance I'd like to give you that I will look at anything you send to me if there's anything specific that you would like to raise over and above what's already been said. I see you'd like a supplementary. You're not entitled to a supplementary, but if you keep it extremely brief and not repeat anything you previously said, I'll be willing to let that go. So, Mr. Rowson, very briefly, if you may.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for your assurance. And if need be, I will come straight to you. I too am an former external auditor at PW. So long ago, it was before it was PwC. I must quibble though with the Council's definition of what is in scope. The law is very clear that it's the accounting records for the financial year to which the audit relates, and that includes the consolidated accounts. I have actually had a very expensive conference with Mr. Philip Coppell, KC, and we did discuss this at some length. And so I am very sure of my position there. But I think I will leave it at that. Thank you very much.
That's very much appreciated, Mr. Rowson. Thank you very much indeed for your question. Also, thank you for your examination of the accounting records. At the end of the day, we all want the same thing, which is for our accounting records to be able to justify the accounts that we produce and the accounts that we eventually sign off. So your examination is appreciated. You will be aware, going back up to 5 years, 6 years now, that I have been quite alert to comments which you and others have made in connection with the accounts, and I haven't always disagreed with some of the comments you have made. So I'll treat anything that you send to me very fairly indeed, but the advice I've been given by officers is quite definitive so far as the scope of Section 26 is concerned, and that relates to the Council's single entity accounts. And if that is not the case, then, as has been explained by the monitoring officer, there is an appeals process which it's possible to undertake. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Rowson. Right, we will now move to agenda. Oh, Councillor Ioannidis.
Sorry, Chair. And apologies, I'm a new councillor, so I'm still trying to get grips with everything, the procedural, etc. And I appreciate your response on Mr. Robson's matter, and also the Legal and Governance Director's response. And I appreciate that, but I want to raise a procedural, maybe a factual concern. The public speaker, correct me if I'm wrong, has clearly stated that the documents were not made available previously during a statutory inspection, yet the council was saying that they were, and there was just some redactions. So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you responded that he'd had the documents, but I think there might be a fundamental legal difference between receiving documents in time to inspect and object and then receiving them after the window is closed. I don't know if that's what's happened in Mr. Robson's case, but can we get clarification on, so I've made some notes here whilst this was going on, when were the specific documents provided, if we can get that information from previously, and was that within the 30 working days for the formal inspection period, and was it complete access? I mean, did it include anything from this land? I'd take not, because you mentioned about it being council related material, not other bodies, and any other agreements or assets or anything that was requested from Mr. Robson, and was that information then redacted or withheld?
Thank you, Councillor Ioannidis. Mr. Hudson, would you care to give a response to that?
Yeah, thank you. I'll take the two parts of this land and the street lighting PFI contract. Street lighting PFI contract, 680 pages long. That contains some commercial information, as you could imagine, in terms of the price of that. In rough figures, it was about 70 pages that needed to be redacted because of that commercial sense. So about 10% of the 680 pages that were provided were redacted on commercial grounds. We fully complied within the time period. We did send, as Chair alluded to, tranches. I again reiterate, when we pull together our statement of accounts, we have a very, very tight timetable, and we have to meet that statutory timetable. One of the reasons to enable the inspection to be able to take place. So therefore, as you can imagine, when you have two organisations closing down their sets of accounts, you will have differences. So in terms of our use of data, we do not use the statement of accounts for this land. We use management accounts. That is what we've provided. And there is further access through things like FOI that Mr. Rowson has used to gather information from this land. And that is also right and proper. And this land have always responded. So that's why I sit here and say we have complied with that, and then we have also responded openly and transparently with our external auditors in following up. I echo what the Chair said. I wholeheartedly welcome public, press, councillor inspections of these accounts. That has to be what underlies our public confidence and governance in this country, let alone in this county. And it must be something that we encourage, and I really welcome that encouragement. And we will openly provide what we can provide where it is not commercially sensitive.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Hudson. And may I just, there was a potential slight misunderstanding in the comment made by Councillor Ioannidis, and that is, it's not that anything to do with this land is not available for public inspection. It's only those items which are within the council's accounts which are subject to public inspection so far as this land is concerned. So, so if there was an attempt made to extend that to the accounts of this land limited, that's where the advice that we've been given is that that's outside the scope of Section 26. But to the extent that anything is within the single accounts, and there are a number of things which are within the single accounts of the council relating to Section to this land limited, then Section 26 would apply. I do need to move on, but you have one further question, Councillor Ioannidis?
It's not a question, it's just a clarification. So we can definitely clarify that Mr. Robson hasn't been denied anything he's legally entitled to be receiving.
That is my understanding of what has been said. However, there is also always the opportunity for any objector to appeal to the independent Information Commissioner's Office if they are unhappy with anything which has happened or which hasn't happened. And again, we have no problem with that. To the best of my knowledge, no such complaint has ever been made. Right. Oh, God, one second.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say thank you.
You're more than welcome. Right. So we can now move on to agenda item 4, which is the draft Cambridgeshire County Council Statement of Accounts for 2024-25. This report will be introduced by Stephen Howarth, who's the Head of Finance, and he's joined by Ellie Todd, who's the Strategic Finance Manager. Mr. Howarth.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon. Yes, so Ellie Todd, my colleague here, manages our corporate finance team who do most of the legwork in terms of production of the Council Statement of Accounts. So as you said, this report presents the draft statement of accounts for the Council for the 24-25 financial year. It represents the consolidation of the financial position of the whole Council, including its in-year spending income, its assets and liabilities, and its reserves position. Publication is a major milestone for the Council each year, and I'm pleased to say that these were published again on time at the end of June. The accounts at 188 pages are lengthy and complex, but they are prepared on the basis of international financial reporting standards as adapted by the SIPFA Code of Practice on Local Authority Accounting for the year. The statement of accounts can be broken down into 3 main elements, which I'll step through briefly. So firstly, the narrative, report and forward sections at the beginning give an overview of the Council's activities for the year and a summary of the financial position. This section is intended to be more accessible to users of the accounts, providing a bit of a bridge between the statutory accounts, which can be complex, and the management accounts that the Council produces, which show more simplified spend, budget and reserves pictures, which are considered regularly by the Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee. Following that is the 4 core statements. So the comprehensive income and expenditure statement, balance sheet and cash flow statements are prepared on a comparable basis through the international standards. And then the movement in reserves statement is specific to local authorities, showing the scale of accounting adjustments that go through the accounts under regulations. And then finally, the notes to the accounts, which are responsible probably for most of the document's length, which provide significant additional statutory disclosure of information, either in the form of further breakdown of the core statements, reconciliations of things like reserves and asset valuations, and additional statutory disclosures such as officer and member remuneration. So turning to the core statements, which I'll step through again briefly. So on the comprehensive income and expenditure statement, or the CIES, as I'll say, this theoretically shows the spending income by council directorate, with then some general cross-council items at the bottom. But this statement is greatly affected by accounting adjustments that we're required to make, mainly on capital items, things like depreciation and valuations, and on the pension on pension liability changes. And one of the key jobs of the notes of the accounts really is to explain that statement further through the expenditure and funding analysis and an analysis of expenditure by type as well. The balance sheet is one of the easiest statements to understand and probably one of the more useful statements. It gives a breakdown of the council's net 1.37 billion of assets for the year. That net asset position includes a strong land and property base, investment assets, and offset by liabilities, including borrowing to fund the capital programme and pension liabilities. The balance sheet is then balanced through showing the usable and unusable reserves that are available to the council. So usable reserves are those general funded earmarked reserves that are available to the council for day-to-day spend, and unusable reserves are reserves that are accumulated through accounting adjustments, usually relating to timing differences on things like on valuations and capital financing entries, and on the pension liability as well, and on the dedicated schools grant deficit too, which is held as an unusable reserve. The balance sheet shows a net decrease in asset between the 2 years, which is mainly due to changes in values of its property and land base, and the reduction in the long-term debt relating to this land, which we'll come to, and an increase in borrowing for the capital programme. Most of the decreases on the unusable reserve side, if you look at how that's balanced, so the impact on funds available to the council is limited really, and the balance sheet nevertheless remains in a relatively healthy position. The movement in reserves statement, the third of the core statement, tries to show the real impact on the general fund position for the council of the in-year income expenditure. It shows and sets out, which is then further reconciled to the document, the about £160 million of accounting adjustments that go through that statement. And then finally, on the core statements, the cash flow statement, which while complex, really just shows a stable position between the 2 years in terms of the cash available to the council at the end of each year. The statement of accounts, as we've said, also includes the group accounts of the council. due to the control of this land, and we're required to produce group accounts to consolidate the company and council accounts and replicate core statements and some key disclosure notes. Turning back to the covering paper, Chair, briefly before I conclude. So the paper sets out, just to give some more sort of background as to what's gone into the production of these accounts, the paper sets out at 2.5 one of the major new technical challenges that we've had to grapple with for this year's accounts, namely the implementation of International Financial Reporting Standard 16 on leases. So the council is now required to account for leases and arrangements that are similar to leases in ways that show both the asset the council has access to and the liability in terms of future payments for access to that asset. And implementation has required a substantial data gathering exercise across the whole council to identify relevant contractual terms, and then the need to turn that information into accounting adjustments. At 2.6 of the paper, we go into some detail on the accounting implications of decisions taken last year by Strategy Resource and Performance Committee on the financing of this land, adding to the extensive section that's in the narrative report to the accounts. So in particular, we signpost people to the impact of the financing changes on the long-term debtor in the balance sheet and on the additional spend that is recognised in the CIES. And we also set out the accounting considerations around valuation of the remaining debtor, the impact on the council's minimum revenue provision for capital financing, and the credit loss assessment as well. Penultimately, the paper goes on in section 2.8 to reiterate explanations provided in previous meetings regarding the expectation that these accounts will continue to receive a disclaimed audit opinion at the end of the process due to the knock-on impact of there having been no audit of 22-23's accounts. And the consequent lack of assurance that the auditor has on opening balances. That absence of audit was due to the sort of national issues in local authority audits. So we're hoping to build back assurance to a fully unmodified opinion over the medium term in line with most authorities. And then finally, the paper sets out at 2.9 and Appendix 1 the status of implementation of recommendations made by the auditor in last year's audit, with progress generally having been made in all of those, and in some cases those now being complete. But just finally to say thanks from me to the team for the work they've done producing these accounts, and looking forward to the external audit, which is sort of kicking off as we speak. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Stephen, and congratulations on managing so succinctly to go through a report and a set of accounts which is a very detailed matter indeed. Chief Executive, would you care to have a few words?
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to echo some of the words the Section 151 officer has already given. I think whilst I recognise these are the draft accounts, it would be incumbent on me to rightly commend our finance staff on the extensive amount of work in short order to produce these on time. And I think it's important, with both Stephen and Ellie sat in front of the committee, I particularly recognise the work of our corporate finance team. Whilst they are supported really well by the other elements of the finance service, this places a huge burden on our corporate finance team at this point of the year, every year, and they always undertake to do this both with utmost rigour, but also with absolute focus on the deadline. So I think, Chair, once again, I echo the words of the Section 151 officer, but want to make the point that our finance staff work exceptionally hard throughout the year, no more so than when they are undertaking the draft accounts. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. I very much agree with what you say. And it is worth noting that whilst we have managed to meet the necessary deadline, not every single principal authority in the country has managed to do so. So thank you very much indeed, and congratulations to our team. Now I'd like to open this to members of the committee. If anyone has any questions either about the report or about the draft accounts, I'm more than happy to take those. Councillor Ioannidis.
Can officers confirm, and please, in simple language, in regards to this land, the 60 million, was that written off or not?
Good, simple question. Stephen.
Sorry, the simple answer is it was converted into a performance contingent capital grant.
So the answer to your question was no, it was not technically written off. I think that's fair to say, is it, Stephen?
If it's not been written off and it's been converted into a grant, how can the council then be assured that we are going to get this money back at any point in the future?
Well, I have an answer for that, but I think that an officer should give you the answer to that rather than me. Stephen?
I suppose I'd suggest the committee refers to the shareholder subcommittee, which will of the assets procurement committee, which will be meeting shortly, which is considering the medium-term business plan for this land, which should sort of set out the position of the company in the medium term.
Would you care to elaborate on that?
Thank you, Chair. Clearly, as part of the work over the last year, we have been looking at the overall arrangements, and as I've said previously, to whichever committee, I'm losing track now, I think it was SRMP, when we look at the return overall in terms of the cash position, just to clarify that the return to the council will be a positive one, even though not as great as one might have hoped back in 2016 before the world changed. The shareholder subcommittee tomorrow will cover the business plan submitted by this land, which has greater detail than it had previously considered, although officers were aware and have been working through that with the company leading up to March. And that clearly indicates that the ability to restructure to support the company's cash not only protected the value of the assets, it enabled us to then take the proper accounting process as we deem it to be, through advice and through the team, in terms of then accounting for that as is set out here, and then going forward in terms of any minimum revenue provision requirement in terms of that converted grant.
Sorry, I'm really not happy with that answer. I mean, I need a clear, plain, simple language. I mean, I can't understand the words. I mean, I work for the reps, the people of my division who speak in simple terms, and they need to be able to understand what is being said here. Because from what I see is that this has been written off. We have no guarantee that we can get back that 60 million under any legal provisions. And that's what I see. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I can't see how we can guarantee that we get this 60 million back. And if we can't guarantee it, then essentially, from what I see, that is a write-off. I mean, and if it is, why is the 60 million not clearly shown in the loss of the accounts rather than it being put in liabilities across a long period of time? I can't understand this.
Okay. It really does become difficult, to be quite honest, when you are talking about the way in which accounts are produced. Some things are technical, and it's difficult to translate those into simple language. I'm going to make an attempt, heaven help me, to translate this into fairly simple language. And if officers feel I've oversimplified, or even worse, got it wrong, I'd like immediate correction. As far as this land is concerned, we have figures within the accounts to do both with debtors and to do with assets. And to the extent that we have any debtor where the recovery is uncertain, then a provision is made. To the extent that we have any asset where we are uncertain about the long-term recovery of the asset or the utilization of it, then an impairment will be shown. So any figure which is in the accounts is going to be subject to assessment as to, in the cases you're talking about, recoverability. And that is part of the whole process of producing accounts, and then also part of the auditor's work to ensure that the assessment which has been made by the officers is a correct one. And it's made more complicated by the comments which are made about minimum revenue provision, which are technically, of course, entirely correct, but I think that just adds to the complication of the whole process. So if we keep it really simple, it is that to the extent that anything is in the accounts and is over, for want of a better word, overvalued, then part of the process that we have, both in terms of the production of the accounts and the audit of the accounts, is to have a provision or impairment as necessary. I believe that I do have Mr. Mohammed Hussain, you have a question or comment to make.
Hi. Yeah, so yes, so some questions to follow up on this one, probably in a similar line. My question was around, we have an equity, I think we had an equity investment of 6 million, which we fully impaired and wrote off. But at the same time, we didn't make any provision on the loans from a credit default perspective. I was just trying to understand some of the thinking and rationale behind that, given historically we know there have been some concerns with making some of those repayments. And I understand the loans have reduced in value, and therefore the interest bearing on those will reduce, and the opportunity to pay that back should increase. However, has it increased to a point where we have confidence that they will start to deliver going forward? And just on I think essentially all this boils down to it. in the new 5-year business plan, are they going to be able to achieve that? And therefore, we can kind of make sure that the loans are not going to default. But could you tell us about how much those plans have been scaled back from initially to now in terms of, how realistic are they to be achieved going forward, and how different in terms of materiality they might be, without going into all the details, just so we have some assurance around that?
Thank you. I think I'll look to Michael. First of all, to give an answer to that.
Thank you, Chair. It's hard after 34 years to not speak as a qualified accountant. So I will try to keep it as simple as I can. There is a real difference between accounting treatment, which is complicated in the public sector in terms of trying to then reconcile that back to the international financial reporting standards. So we have made accounting treatments and differences through a capital adjustment account, which is in effect a paper account to enable us to reconcile the balance sheet with the revenue account. There has been no loss to the council taxpayer in terms of revenue out to revenue in. We have taken decision to impair the equity at this stage. We are exploring and will continue to explore with the company potential future options that might see that written back. But we have taken a prudent approach to put through the accounting treatments as recognised by KPMG in its audit report to this committee in February. We will wait and we will determine through our external auditors the treatment of that. We have, in reaching the conclusion, and it is my conclusion, sought to rely not only on the team but on external advice, that we have followed that correct accounting treatment. And that is where we have this complexity of difference between accounting treatment versus cash. But to reiterate, there is no loss in a cash term perspective. We have simply changed the treatment on the balance sheet between loans and assets.
Thank you very much indeed, Michael. The only word I disagree with you in everything that you just said is the word simply, because I don't think much was simple as far as this whole process has been concerned. But that is one of the reasons why the judgments which we have from our officers, which have produced the draft accounts that we have now, those judgments will be challenged and those numbers will be challenged as part of the independent external audit. And I've got a fair amount of experience as far as accounts are concerned, and to be perfectly honest, I would need a qualified external auditor to be able to give a good judgment about that, rather than relying on my own judgment. And I think none of us who are not specialists in the area can easily manage to challenge it. I will let you come back. We are a bit short of time, but Councillor Ioannidis, it's an important issue.
I'm not quite happy. I mean, the last full council, we got another public question that brought to my attention something that is quite concerning. I mean, for me to understand this, and correct me if I'm wrong, it appears that maybe some assets, because we were mentioning that nothing has gone out from the taxpayer that has not returned, but it appears that some assets owned that was undercharged by the council was sold by this land, and then the legal charge that was held by the council was not repaid, and that money was then returned to the council as interest payments. So for me, that seems like circular accounting, which might account for nothing looking like it's been lost, but realistically, we've made a loss. Can someone make sense of that for me, please?
Let me ask Michael to answer that specific question.
Yeah, so just to clarify a few points, land transferred at value, Red Book analysis. So that was done correctly back in 2018. The company have never defaulted on a loan repayment. The majority of the loans were always due to be repaid 2026 to 2029. That remains the situation for those interest-bearing interest-bearing loans that remain. the position in relation to the cash flow that I mentioned is rather unusually, the council chose to charge interest on, well, the council and the company agreed for the full drawdown of the land on day one and to charge interest on day one. That is quite unusual and put the company into quite a commercially disadvantaged position. It put the council into an advantaged position in that in the 4 years that then followed, it received £43 million worth of interest in terms of the revenue income to the county council. So that actually accounted for a large element of the loss, because a land development company spends its first few years not only setting up, but in terms of generating the land to up value to then dispose of in whatever format. So it incurs considerable costs in those early years, which is why a lot of the loans were back paid until 2029. Of course, what then happened is we had a pandemic. We had global and national economic positions, which meant that both costs and the market were affected in terms of interest rates and inflation. And that then had a knock-on impact to a number of the parcels of land. And that caused last year a slight deference of the interest in order to secure the cash flow of the company. So the council will have received, if the business plan is delivered as it is presented tomorrow, and of course there are always risks and things that could happen, but we have worked through in terms of scenarios of that, as the subcommittee will hear tomorrow. We estimate that the council will receive back £126 million on the £119.8 million of loans that it has provided for their company. That is the cash perspective. We then have to reflect that in terms of how we address that through the accounts, which becomes the bit that I do really struggle to keep it simple in terms of beyond the response that I just gave before. But that's why the company's position in terms of what it's returned and that interest arose because of that decision to transfer all of the land at value and to charge interest at that point in time.
Thank you, Michael. I think that it's important for us to remember we are not a service committee. We are the ones who are responsible for ensuring that the draft accounts are correct, or at least that they're appropriate for the auditors to look at. And I'd like to concentrate far more on the accounts rather than necessarily the underlying issues which have resulted in where we are now, and to see if it is the case that the transactions which have been put through the books within the period of 24-25 are accurately reflected in the accounts, together with all, in terms of this land limited, all the necessary provisions and impairments. And that's where the check by the external auditors is very important. Mohammed, do you have a further question?
Yeah, it was just on the accounts themselves. There's a section on estimation uncertainty in terms of a note to the accounts, and I wondered if that would benefit from a section either on this land as well, in terms of what some of those uncertainties might be going into the future. And similarly, something on the school safety valve potentially, in terms of, again, key risks that might materialize in the future.
The numbers which are involved there are quite significant, and I'll ask officers, I'll take it offline if you don't mind, and I'll ask officers to consider expanding on the issues of uncertainty so far as those two very big numbers are concerned. Thank you. That's a helpful question. Any other comments from anyone? Graham.
I think I'm right in saying, Michael, that our usable reserves have gone down substantially since last year. I can understand there are various reasons for that, but are you concerned by the amount of usable reserves, and for how many years can we expect to see it continuing to go down?
Councillor Wilson is correct in the assumption in terms of the usable reserves have been used. An element of that, of course, is earmarking, and there's always the intention to use that. We did use some of the general fund element as well, but that topped back up through the financial plan. So I reported to Strategy, Resources and Performance at the end of January the overall position in terms of the financial stability. That also set out a track of the usual usable reserves, including obviously this year and future years. We're still in line with that. We've not taken any further decisions. So at that point, I judged that financially stable. We have since had an update on the one significant risk that I identified in that document, which was the safety valve. The treatment of the DSG overspend and whether that was to be treated as on council or off balance sheet position. We have since heard from government that that will be extended to 2028 and therefore it, in that sense, is not part of that assessment because it doesn't impact my judgment in a technical sense. And we are due further announcements from government in the autumn as towards that resolution position. So I'm not minded to change my position in February as of today. So whilst I would love to have many more reserves, we have that fine balance between holding reserves unnecessarily from the council taxpayers in terms of their bills and managing the authority. And I think we do have that right at the moment in terms of that financial sustainability.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. And so it is really a case that government has kicked the can down the road by a further couple of years. Thank you. Other comments? I'll raise a few, if I may, very quickly. I went through the accounts very carefully, and unfortunately, things change all the time. And if you don't keep right up to date, there are things which happen which you're not aware of. And when it came to fair value measurements, we got on page 46 of the accounts, I was completely unaware of observable inputs and unobservable inputs. So that was completely new to me. But what surprised me was that there were significant unobservable inputs used in the fair value measurement of assets, including management assumptions regarding rent growth, vacancy levels, and discount rates. I assume from that what's meant by vacancy levels is potential future vacancy levels, although I think it would help if we specifically state that. But as far as discount rates are concerned, obviously we know what the discount rates were as of the 31st of March 2025. We know what discount rates are now, to the extent that that may be relevant to us. But why would it be necessary for us to make any estimations about future levels of discount rates in the accounts for 31st March 25?
If I pass over to Ellie to give an answer on that one, thank you.
Well, I wasn't actually going to give a detailed answer. I was going to say that's one that we can pass back to our valuers to kind of come back to you with a more detailed response. But I take the point, so we can have a look at that.
Thank you. I look forward either to an explanation or to that particular reference disappearing when we next see a set of accounts. I will point out on page 64 that the banding of salaries which is given appears to me to be arithmetically impossible for the band which is given for 150,000 to 150,000 of £1 to 200,000 pounds, where we're told there are two exit packages which came to a total of 269,000, which I wasn't really able to reconcile to that particular band. Have I misunderstood, or is that something which may need to be adjusted?
I think, Chair, if we just look into that one, we'll provide a response outside, just rather than trying to do the maths here.
That's appreciated. Thank you very much indeed. And finally, I do note that the narrative report is 19 pages long. Now, the narrative report was the last significant change made to how local authority accounts have to be produced. And it was called a simplification at the time. And as so often with government, simplifications actually made things more complicated rather than less, and increased the size of the accounts and also increased the amount of work that the auditors needed to do, because they have then to check all the statements which are contained within the narrative report against the figures which are in the accounts. And I personally think that sometimes with narrative reports, less is more. And I'd just like to make my statement, and the Chief Executive may wish to explain why he believes differently, that maybe there could be value if we are trying to produce something which is accessible to people in having something a little bit shorter than 19 pages of a narrative report. I am aware of councils, especially ones where I've made the same speech, where they do have shorter narrative reports. I'm also aware, I'm sorry to say, of some councils which have longer narrative reports. I don't know, Chief Executive, if you care to comment on that. Not for this year, of course, but for future years.
Thank you, Chair. A perfectly valid representation and point to raise. If there is an opportunity to further simplify, I'm sure we'd be happy to do that. I think the Section 151 officer has a comment.
Oh, Section 151 officer.
I think through you, Chair, we have reduced it in the last 3 years. I think it was about 39 pages. So we have reduced it down. This is one of those, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you know. You're not sharing enough, you're oversharing. But we will continue to review that. There is a SITFA panel led by one of my former members of staff that will be reporting and looking at that this year. So we await that with interest and we'll assess that for its guidance.
That's very much appreciated. Thank you. We're being asked to, if we move to the report recommendations, we're being asked to note the Council's draft statement of accounts for 24-25, which are the ones which are included in Appendix 3 to the report. Are members satisfied to note these accounts? 1 second.
No, Chair. Chair, members, I've got to oppose these accounts. Why? Because what's being presented here, I don't feel is a true picture of this council's financial health.
Yeah, Councillor, you notice we're not being asked to approve. We're not being asked to approve the accounts, merely to note the draft accounts. You're perfectly at liberty not to note them if you so wish. Have that recorded. But all we're being asked to do is note rather than approve.
No, I don't want to note these accounts. I don't.
Fine, then I'll move to a vote. Those in favour of noting the accounts, please show. Those against? That's approved by a majority. Thank you very much indeed. I'm afraid we're a little bit behind schedule now, but I thought it was really useful to allow the comments which have been made to be expanded on. It's a very important point, a very large number within the accounts. Move on to agenda item 5, and that's the regular internal audit progress report, which will be introduced by Mairead Clayton, who is the head of internal audit and risk management. Mairead.
Thank you, Chair. So this is our first internal audit progress report for the 2025 to 26 financial year, and it covers work completed by the team to the end of June. So just to draw the committee's attention to some key aspects of the report, sections 3 and 4 outline the reports which have been issued as final since our previous progress report in March, and they include summaries of key findings for audits where a limited assurance was given. Members of this committee are able to access all final audit reports via the Teams site, which you should all now have access to. Section 6 sets out some updates on the internal audit plan. We have added a review of the scheme of delegation to the plan, but we have also had to cut back some reviews due to pressures from staff sickness at the back end of the financial year, some pressures due to whistleblowing, which I will talk about in a moment, and the fact that we have had a couple of vacant posts, which are noted as being out to recruitment in section 5.2. Very happy to confirm that since writing the report, we have appointed to the senior auditor post with one of our existing trainees having been successful in obtaining that role. And in addition to the recruiting to the one vacant trainee post, I have put forward a business case to convert one of our trainee posts to a senior auditor post, which would support our team in terms of having greater resilience going forward. Section 7 within the report notes outstanding agreed audit actions with an increase to 83 outstanding actions compared to 69 in our previous report. And then in terms of section 9 of the report around whistleblowing and counter fraud and investigations, just to flag to this committee, we are receiving a very high volume of whistleblowings currently. So the report shows 18 cases to the 10th of July. As of today, we're already at 21 cases this financial year. And so for comparison, last year we had 36 cases for the entire year. So that is a really significant increase. It's an area that has been steadily increasing for a while, and significantly late in the last financial year, we haven't launched new whistleblowing and fraud e-learning, which is now essential training for all staff. So my belief is that this increase in reporting that we are seeing is primarily from internal employees. And therefore, I believe it is largely due to greater awareness as a result of this new training, which is positive, but it does create some pressures on the team in terms of triaging those concerns, making sure they're going to the right place for investigation or investigated by the team where appropriate, or that they're closed if actually initial investigation shows no significant concerns. Those are the key points I wanted to bring to your attention, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mairead, and thank you for this report. It was really very clearly laid out. And on the subject you've just said, I think it's to be welcomed that there has been an increase in whistleblowing reports, especially given that it appears to be as a result of greater awareness. And we welcome all appropriate whistleblowing reports which are given to the council. I'd like just to ask the Chief Executive to respond, though, to what's on paragraph 2.2.1, which shows that the increase in outstanding agreed audit actions from the previous year going up from 74 to 83, and more worryingly, the increase in the number which are due to be implemented, which are over 12 months old, which has gone up from 10 to 18. And I'd just like the Chief Executive to comment on those numbers, to say if he believes if there is anything systemic causing that increase, and to ask him if he thinks those numbers will go down in future.
Thank you, Chair. So I think the specific paragraph in the report is 723 that refers to the overall position of audit actions. 18 recommendations, as you've said, are currently overdue by 12 months or more, and that is an increase of 8 since the last reporting cycle when internal audit provided this committee with an update. Looking at the causation factors for the actions concerned being overdue, members will note that there is no single underlying cause. They are very variable in terms of the nature of the actions. What I can see is the one essential item that is overdue relates to the discussions that continue to be ongoing with the Department for Education on the safety valve agreement, which is therefore proving difficult to close at present. There are also 3 high-rated actions, again, all of which have complex underpins. I would note, however, in one of those 3 cases that relate to capital project management, there were a series of underlying recommendations that had to be completed first. As I understand it, those underlying recommendations are now nearing completion, which will enable the overall outstanding high action to be closed. So in response, Chair, to your question, no, I don't believe there is a systemic issue, but it is disappointing there has been a rise in actions outstanding for more than 12 months. I would also note that in some of those actions, they pertain to services that are currently shared with other local authorities, which, as members of this committee will be aware, certainly from some of my remarks, I have question marks over those lead authority functions being retained, and clearly local government reorganisation will give us an opportunity to perhaps redraw some of those boundaries. So, Chair, no systemic issues, but a disappointing improvement. And the final bit in response to your question is, do I expect them to go down? Yes, I do. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed for that clear and unequivocal answer at the end. Any comments or questions from anyone about anything on the report? Graham first.
Thank you, Chair. I'm delighted to hear that you've been able to recruit an extra member of staff, but this is an issue that I raised previously, and at the time you were able to get in external support. Is that something which should be being considered now in order to ensure that you are able to deliver your audit plan in full, or are you content that it is some things are slipping?
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. It's a good question. It's something that, as head of internal audit, I do keep under review and consider, do we need to bring in external support? The issue that we have is that so often external support requires quite a lot of input from the existing audit team in order to bring them up to speed on the specific background within the council, the key contacts for the review. And so sometimes from my perspective, it's preferable to have a temporary vacancy gap and then fill that with individuals who we're confident are going to be able to hit the ground running and deliver the work that we need them to. I think We will have to keep that under review because of the background pressure created by the whistleblowings. Now, the extent to which an increase in whistleblowing creates pressure on the team varies depending on the nature and type of whistleblowings that we receive. If there are serious concerns about fraud, theft, corruption, governance issues, that's for my team to investigate. If there are concerns that relate more to things like safeguarding, health and safety, then actually that's for other teams to investigate, and the internal audit team provides that initial triage and follow up on the closure of those reviews. So assuming that the pressure from whistleblowings doesn't grow too great, in which case if it does, we would need to consider additional resource. I believe that with a new senior auditor who is already in post, a trainee who should be in post by September, another additional trainee starting with us from finance in September, which increases our complement as well, and hopefully an additional senior auditor, I think we should be able to recoup some of the gap that we've experienced at the early part of the year, and therefore I currently do not think that we need that internal resource. However, I will come back to the committee if my position on that does change.
Thank you, Mairead. Chief Executive.
Two things, if I may, Chair. First, thank you to Councillor Wilson for asking the question. To reassure members, it's the question I ask Mairead every single time we meet, because we meet on an ongoing and regular basis. And one of the things I have to be assured by is that not only can the opinion be delivered, but Mairead has sufficient resource within her team to be able to fulfil to complete her responsibilities as Chief Internal Auditor. As you would expect, that's something I take careful attention for in terms of compliance with public sector internal audit standards. Chair, I also wanted to use the opportunity to briefly come back to your remarks on whistleblowing to say that I agree entirely with the statements you've made. Members who have been on this committee previously will recall we had a significant issue around concerns that whistleblowing was not being used appropriately, and indeed people were not raising concerns. The authority has taken active steps to improve both the contents of the policy, the training for staff, the culture of the organisation to ensure people feel safe and able to speak up. And really importantly, we're seeing significant improvements in follow-through on whistleblowing actions. And whilst many issues may be raised as whistleblowing, as Mairead and her team will rightly point out when she reports on these matters, they do not necessarily result in whistleblowing. They may be referred to other ways for being dealt with because they don't fall within the spirit of the whistleblowing policy. Very importantly, Chair, I would just like to finalise that point by saying, of course, one of the benefits of undertaking the benchmarking we did with Protect was to ensure we could further enhance our whistleblowing regime, which has given greater confidence to staff to come forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Councillor Fane.
Thank you, Chair. My question relates to the way in which the...
Please do speak into the microphone. Thank you.
The way in which the internal audit assigns 3 opinions, paragraph 224, refers on the controlled environment assurance, the compliance assurance, and the organisational impact. Now, in the table on page 6 of the finalised assignments, to me as a non-specialist, most of that looks fairly reassuring, but there is one item relating to adults' health and commissioning where the organisational impact is assessed to be major. And I'm just wondering if you give us some more guidance as to what that means and what the next steps might be.
Thank you. Mairead.
Thank you. So this relates to the Learning Disability Partnership pooled budget disaggregation. As with any audit report that has a limited opinion, there is a summary which provides more detail than I'm potentially able to provide right now on the findings of the audit at section 4.3. The major organisational impact opinion related to the findings of the audit, and particularly the audit report was issued very shortly before the disaggregation was due to take place. So it was quite a time-bound audit opinion. I think now things have moved on and the Strategy Resources and Performance Committee heard at their previous meeting that actually the risk around that disaggregation has been de-escalated from the corporate risk register. So I think my key message would be to say that we, as internal auditors, felt there was a significant risk in relation to the progress of that project at the time that we issued that draft report and opinion to the service. My understanding is that that has now reduced, and happy to follow that up in a further note to a future committee, if that would be helpful.
Thank you, Mary. Chief Executive? Nope. Okay, thank you. It is worth emphasising that our job here is to look at the internal audit report. We're not a service committee, and if we do feel that there is something which is so significant that it does need to be looked at in more detail, one way we can do that is by referring the matter back to the service committee itself for their further consideration. It is a power we have within the Constitution, which, to the best of my knowledge, in the 10 years I've been a county councillor, has only been used 3 times, but those 3 times have all been within the last 2 years. So it is something that we can do and that we should do if we believe there's something which needs to be referred back. Councillor Unides, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I apologise. I keep bringing us back to this land, but at the same time, I don't apologise because I don't see any mention of the 60 million this land loan being converted into a grant in any sort of risk register, and the governance statement is our annual statement of truth. It tells the public that this is what we've done to uphold your trust, and I just don't see any of this land risks reflected in the risk register.
Thank you. At the moment, we're talking about the internal audit rather than the risk register or the governance statement. But as far as internal audit is concerned, Mairead, what would you care to say about this land limited?
Thank you. I would just note that within our audit plan for the year in Q2 2025 to 26, which is at section 6.4 of the internal audit progress report, within our Q2 plan is an audit of this land limited. So it is an area we have looked at previously, we are expecting to re-audit that in the near future.
Would you be kind enough just to expand on that? Is it an internal audit of this land limited, or is it an internal audit of the council's relationship with this land limited?
Thank you, Chair. It's a very good point and a key point. This is a review to provide assurance over the governance and shareholder monitoring arrangements which Cambridgeshire County Council has in place as part of its role as shareholder of this land limited. So a very key distinction. We are not the internal auditors of this land limited, and our assurance is from the perspective of the shareholder, which is the council. Thank you.
That's a really helpful clarification. Thank you very much indeed. Right. If there are no other comments or questions, we'll move to the report recommendation, and we're being asked to, we have commented on the report and considered it. Is everyone happy for us to accept that report? Yes, that seems to be no, 1 second.
Chair, I oppose.
Okay. We will note that for the record. Thank you very much indeed. We can move on to agenda item 6 now, which is the annual risk report for 24-25. And Mairead, would you be kind enough to introduce this report? We do, of course, have an exempt appendix, and if any member would like to ask a question relating to that, would you let me know now? Because we would need to move into exempt session, and I might change the agenda order if it turns out we need to move into exempt session. Does anyone need to go to the exempt appendix? Nope. Good. Mairead.
Thank you, Chair. This is our annual report on risk management at Cambridgeshire County Council. The report summarises some of the key risk management activity that has taken place in year for 2024 to 25, and it also provides an update on the corporate risk register. It is the same risk report which has already been to Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee at the start of this month. So worth noting that it captures the position at late June prior to the production of that report. The corporate risk register is attached as Annex A with Risk 8 in a confidential appendix as noted. There are a few key updates provided at section 5 of the annual report, and I would note in particular linking back to our discussion regarding the Learning Disabilities Partnership audit, risk 13, which was the risk that arrangements to support people with learning disabilities result in poor outcomes due to uncertainty of decoupling of funding arrangements via the Section 75 agreement. This risk score, as of June, has reduced from 16 to 10, and it was therefore agreed by our leadership team to de-escalate the risk from the corporate risk register to the Adults Health and Commissioning Director at Risk Register for ongoing management. You can find more information on the reasons that the risk has been de-escalated at section 5.5 of Appendix 1. A new risk, which is risk 14, the risk that the council's governance on health and safety is inadequate, has been added to the corporate risk register, and more information on this is at section 5.7. Risk 11 regarding the risk of failure of collaborative working has increased from 12 to 16. More information at section 5.10. And finally, risk 12, that Cambridgeshire County Council is not adequately prepared for the impacts of the changing climate, has reduced from 16 to 12, with more information at section 5.11. So quite a few movements on the corporate risk register in this round of reporting. Also to highlight that our new corporate risk manager has undertaken a risk maturity review using a framework from the Association of Local Authority Risk Managers. The outcomes of this review have been used to inform an update of our ongoing 3-year rolling risk management strategy, and that is attached at Appendix B. The annual report and the strategy also provide an overview of some of the actions from the previous iteration of the risk strategy, and those actions have been implemented in the 24 to 25 financial year. Finally, we are also presenting the updated risk management policy at Annex C. There is a key change around the updated approach to risk appetite, which includes defining both the council's maximum tolerable risk appetite and working to define the optimum risk appetite for each type of risk. Key changes are at section 4.3 of the policy, and the new Appendix D to the policy. Just to note that the updated risk management policy and strategy have been formally approved by the Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee as the committee with delegated responsibility for development and oversight of the risk management framework and strategy, but they are also presented to this committee as part of Audit and Accounts Committee's role around considering the effectiveness of risk management arrangements and seeking assurances that the appropriate action is being taken in relation to risk. Thank you, and happy to take any questions.
Right. Questions?
Chair, can I ask if the DSG deficit if it now red rated?
Right.
Thank you. There is not an individual risk off the top of my head for the DSG deficit. It is incorporated as part of risk 3, which is the risk that the council does not have sufficient budget to achieve its short and medium term objectives.
Thank you. That's despite being over 60 million, and rising.
Section 151 officer.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Chair. There are clearly a number of sub-risk registers that sit below the corporate risk register. Page 335 does identify and recognise the current position of this in terms of awaiting the position on the statutory override. We, as I referred to before, we now have that. We're waiting government's position. We are in constant dialogue with the Department for Education related to the safety valve payments that we face, and therefore, in that sense, it is not a risk that sits on our balance sheet as it is at the moment. But we continue to have those discussions both locally and nationally through groups such as the County Council Network on the future management of that risk. So it is identified through risk 3, as Mairead rightly points out, but we do have other risks and other processes which monitor and manage this risk.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from anyone? Oh, Mohammed, my apologies.
Yeah, that's okay. I just had a question on the two risks that are kind of moving in different directions. So you've got risk of failure of collaborative working, which is increasing, but then the risk of the council workforce is not able to meet its business needs reducing. And it's just a question of that there's probably an element of relationship between those risks, just understanding if we're comfortable that they're going in completely different directions.
Thank you, Mairead.
Thank you. I think we would see those risks as actually being quite distinct. So the workforce risk relates to the council's employees, our ability to fill positions which perhaps have a high level of technical experience or knowledge qualifications. And generally, it is felt that that risk is reducing while recognising that there are still pockets within the council where we are struggling to recruit and retain members of staff that we need for those posts. Conversely, the failure of collaborative working risk, and that is more about our relationships with our partners and particularly with other public sector bodies. So that would include partners in the NHS, other district councils, etc. I think part of the reason why that risk has increased will be down to things like local government reorganisation and the reorganisations relating to the integrated care boards. And so I think there's quite distinct drivers in terms of why one risk is increasing its score and one is reducing. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair. Just on risk 11, failure of collaborative working to support what the head of internal audit has said. The reason that's increased is very much because of the reforms that are happening pan-public sector. So whilst local government reorganisation is obviously one of those factors, that clearly has a more focused impact on local authorities. We are, given we're a provider of social services, equally concerned about the substantial reforms being taken across the NHS and the speed at which those reforms are being implemented. So for those members that may not be aware, Cambridgeshire and Peterborough currently has an integrated care board that only covers Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. They are being required by government to reduce their running costs by 50% by the end of October, and at the same time are being required to cluster with 2 other integrated care boards. So the reforms to the NHS create some significant concerns for this authority in terms of removal of local leadership knowledge and understanding of the needs of our communities. So the impact of those reforms, local government reorganisation, and dare I say even changes in the leadership of our constabulary at which members may be aware of, all of those present a greater risk to collaborative working within our system and will continue to be an issue, I would suggest, Chair, given the large-scale public sector reforms the government appears to have embarked on. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Graham.
Thank you, Chair. I have 2 questions, if I may. One, it refers to an e-learning module, which is available to all officers. Maybe it should be available to all councillors as well, but that's a separate question. How do we know how many people have actually signed up to it and done it? Because clearly it's no point in having it if we don't know whether people have done it. And second question, I'm pleased to see that directorates can escalate risks up to the corporate leadership team. But equally, how does the corporate leadership team identify that there is a particular risk that needs addressing either by a directorate or by corporate leadership team? I noticed, for example, that health and safety was added as a corporate leadership team risk in the corporate risk register, which is absolutely right. But is there any other professional judgment which is done in order to ensure that comprehensively things are addressed by a corporate leadership team rather than left to directorates to bring up? Thank you.
Who would care to answer that one? I think Chief Executive first, at least.
I'll start, Chair, and Mairead may want to come in because I'm conscious she's also a head of risk management, so she may wish to offer a comment. So Councillor Wilson is right. Clearly, directorates can escalate risks directly into the corporate leadership team for consideration to be added to the corporate risk register. Equally importantly, those are reviewed on an ongoing basis. So CLT has a specific meeting that undertakes risk and assurance reviews every quarter without fail. I chair those meetings. They are minuted. We review the risks clearly. At that meeting, we get input from our risk management professionals. Equally importantly, because I meet on a monthly basis in formal setting with the statutory officers in line with our requirements as a local authority that follows good governance practice, risks identified through that meeting are also fed into the corporate risk register discussions. And then, of course, if I'm aware of broader policy risks or indeed through discussions with elected members, we take into account points that may have been raised. In terms of the health and safety risk that you've highlighted, That's actually a very good example of something that we've been strengthening as an organisation, but particularly following the prosecution of the County Council in respect to the guided busway. That was a direct requirement from me to add health and safety into the corporate risk register to give it that additional visibility until such time as I'm assured and members can be assured that that's being managed effectively, and not just with regard to the guided busway, but health and safety as a whole systems risk for the organisation. Mairead may wish to add some further comments, Chair. Thank you.
If you wish to, Mairead.
Thank you. I'd support the Chief Executive's comments in terms of the escalation in how CLT can identify and add risks to the corporate risk register. I think when we look at the level of change to the corporate risk register that we've seen in the current annual risk report compared to previous risk reports, we can see that that those changes are coming through and they are being raised both by CLT and coming up from directorates. With regards to the first part of your question, Councillor Wilson, regarding the e-learning module, this isn't a module which is mandatory or required for all members of staff, but we do receive reports from our learning and development team that enable us to review which colleagues have completed the e-learning. We have a corporate risk and performance group, which brings together colleagues from across the organisation who have key roles in risk and performance management. And we also invite individuals who undertake the e-learning who aren't already members of that group to join that group if they would wish. We have, in terms of your comment regarding whether the content can be made available to members, we should be able to add that to the members' learning and development site to allow members to access that training if they would wish. And we have also booked in, I think, a date now for some training to be carried out in September with myself and our new corporate risk manager on risk management, which will be accessible to members regardless of which committee they sit on. So that will also be made available to all members. Thank you.
Thank you, Mairead. Chief Executive.
Apologies, Chair. I should have said a couple of additional things in my earlier response. I should also add that proactively the Council's policy team scans the legislative and policy environment. We receive a report from them monthly. That's published on CamWeb, which is also accessible to elected members. That ensures that we're aware of potential additional risks coming over the horizon, if I can describe it that way. And then, mindful of the meeting we're in, of course, we take into account the findings from any audit reports. Thank you.
Thank you. And it's important, I think, to note that as far as CLT's assessment of and monitoring of risk and risks becoming corporate risks, that if we prioritize everything, we end up prioritizing nothing. So we need to be just as keen to deprioritize risks where appropriate as we are to prioritize them. And I'm sure that as part of the regular scanning which takes place, that does take place as far as the Chief Executive is concerned. Good, thank you. Just one final point, if I may, and this might be more towards the Chief Executive because it's to do with members rather than anything else. I'm unsatisfied that members really appreciate the importance of risk appetite, which they must own, and not merely risk appetite in a singular, but risk appetites in plural, and the fact that different appetites should apply to different risks, and how important that is in terms of the decisions which are made by the Council. Does the Chief Executive share my view that more needs to be done so that the understanding about risk appetites is made available to members of the Council?
Chair, in very simple terms, yes. I think we have an upcoming risk management session for member training purposes. Clearly, that's not a one-off. It's important that we keep updating members on those issues. I would also expect in terms of risk appetite, because it has to differ depending on the subject area and the way our risk appetite statement is set, that individual executive directors will continue to work closely with the service and policy committees concerned so that risk appetite is nuanced and understood. You will recognise, for example, from the corporate risk register attached to this report that we have a much more zero tolerance approach to certain risks like safeguarding of children and young people as we do to some of the other risks. So it is more nuanced, and that is why I would agree with you, Chair, that we need a more ongoing approach to risk appetite, understanding, briefing, and starting with all members participating in the training. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Well, we have commented on the various parts of this agenda item, and we're being asked to note the annual risk management report, the corporate risk register, the risk management strategy, and the updated risk policy. Are all members happy to note those? Not all. I'll take it to a vote. Those in favour of noting, then please show. Those against? record. It's been approved by a majority. Thank you. Move on to agenda item 7. We have managed to get through 6 of the 13 items so far on the agenda, which is good going, but I hope that we manage to complete all our work before 8 o'clock tonight. Item 7 on the agenda is the failure to prevent fraud and anti-fraud and corruption strategy. And Mairead, you'll introduce this report as well.
Thank you, Chair. This report outlines a new offence, the offence of failure to prevent fraud, which comes into force from the 1st of September 2025, following the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act 2023. The key thing for this committee to note is that if an organisation such as the Council were to be accused of an offence of failure to prevent fraud under the Act, the organisation could use the defence of having had what are called reasonable procedures for fraud prevention in place. The legislation outlines 6 principles of reasonable prevention that organisations should implement to demonstrate that they are adequately addressing the risk of fraud. And these principles are fairly similar to those which are found in the Secretary of State guidance for the Bribery Act 2010, which is something that we already incorporate in our procedures at Cambridgeshire. So the report before you now outlines at a high level the arrangements that the Council currently has in place for each of these 6 principles of reasonable prevention. And additionally, the process of undertaking an assessment of procedures against the new legislation has prompted us to note that currently the Council does not have a dedicated counter-fraud strategy, which is recommended as best practice for local authorities. We've therefore taken the opportunity to develop a proposed rolling 3-year counter-fraud strategy, which is attached as Annex B to the report. This has been agreed by CLT and is being presented to this committee for approval. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Mairead. Members? The report was very well written. In fact, it appears it was so well written that no members actually have any questions or comments to make. I have to say, well, it was very clearly written, so thank you very much indeed for that. We're being asked to approve the proposed counter-fraud strategy and to note the reasonable procedures to prevent fraud. Those in favour, please show. And that's agreed unanimously. Thank you very much indeed. Agenda item 8 is the annual governance statement for 2024-25. This will be introduced by Emma Duncan, who's the Service Director for Legal and Governance and is our monitoring officer. Emma.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good afternoon again, members. Members who are familiar with Audit and Accounts Committee will have seen the annual governance statement in previous years. It is a description and analysis of the Council's governance environment framework, the systems and processes we have in place for managing governance within the Council, and it's presented to the committee to ensure that it reflects the committee's understanding of how the systems and processes are working, whether we have the right things in place and whether they're working. This year there has been a change to the annual governance statement. The SIPA have produced some more guidance, which we've taken into account in the preparation of the statement, and members will see that reflected in the more thematic approach to the annual governance statement. Less of a focus on the cold hard money cash elements of it, the financial elements, and more of a move to a cultural a focus on governance, really. Members will also see within there the action plan they approved from last year in terms of the things we needed to do to improve the governance framework, and we'll also see some of the more significant issues which we will work on this year and bring an action plan back to committee to review, approve, and then monitor through their work. The action plan itself is something which is monitored by the statutory officer group. So that's the head of paid service, the chief executive, the section 151 officer, the executive director for finance resources, and myself as the monitoring officer on a monthly basis. So we keep an eye on that, and also we add anything that we consider that is rising up the governance agenda, and that may come through conversations with external audit, internal audit, at CLT, through this committee, through contact with members, and through any other instance that happen within the council year. So those are presented at the end of the report, and members can see that there. So more than happy to take comments from members in relation to improvements that could be made to our systems and processes, if there are gaps or concerns that members may have. And obviously there is a delegation within the recommendation to myself in consultation with the chair of the committee to make minor amendments as necessary. So I think that sort of summarises it, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Emma. Before moving to any questions, I'm aware that Councillor Wilson has an amendment to propose to the recommendations. Amendments to recommendations do need to be supplied a number of days in advance of any committee meeting under our constitution, but the chair has discretion to allow them. And Councillor Wilson has advised me what his amendment is, and I'm more than happy to allow that to take place at short notice. Councillor Wilson.
Well, I wanted to ask the question first, Chair, as to why the recommendation is that the AGS should be approved by various people, plus in consultation with the chair, and it specifically excludes the vice chair, because I think for some other committees we've done things in liaison with the chair and vice chair, and I just wonder, is there a specific reason for that here? And if there isn't, perhaps we can include the vice chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. We'll take that as a question then. Emma, any reason why we shouldn't include the vice chair? I've got no objection.
There is actually a reason why we don't include that anymore. It's a deliberate change to that drafting on the recommendations. That's because within the council now we have an overall political majority. Before we were a balanced council, which meant that the involvement of the vice chair was necessary to keep the political balance appropriate. But because we have now an overall political administration, that can now be deleted, and that's what we're doing as standard practice on all reports now.
Thank you. That's very interesting and quite, I fully understand the logic. However, I don't quite see how the logic applies in this case when the chair of this committee is not part of that majority administration.
You are a special case, Councillor Bowden, in that regard. I don't, in relation to this committee, because it is, and as we have always maintained with the Audit and Accounts Committee, it's a politically impartial body. It's here to hold make sure the performance of the council is appropriate, and that's not a political matter. The committee has always been very clear about that. I have no objection in terms of the amendment being proposed. We're more than happy to discuss, as you always know, with members in terms of any delegation to officers and alterations that may be necessary. So I have no particular issue with that at all.
That's very much appreciated, Emma, and it's quite interesting to us. I think some of us are quite surprised to hear that this change is taking place right across the council. Councillor Wilson, you're happy then to put that forward as a formal amendment that we add the vice chair to this resolution?
I'm very happy in this instance and fully understand what Emma's comments. I must admit, it wasn't something which I picked up previously, but now that it's been explained, it does make sense. But in this instance, because the chair is not part of the ruling party deliberately, then I think it makes sense that the vice chair is included.
Good. Are members happy that the recommendation, be so amended? Rishenda.
Sorry, Chair, just can we have a seconder, please?
I will be happy to second Councillor Wilson's proposal. Are members happy that we do amend the recommendation accordingly? Yes, I'm getting nods around the table, so we'll accept that. Thank you very much indeed, by consensus. Right, we can move to questions, general questions. Any questions on the annual governance statement, members? No, I see no. Oh, sorry, Councillor Wilson, apologies.
Well, I've got a couple of minor comments. The first one, I guess, is Section 11 comes before Section 12. I worked that out. Should it actually be the other way around? Should it be how we've improved our governance arrangements in 2024-25, and then how we're going to further improve them in 25-26? So that would be one question. And then there's an earlier, I think maybe a typo in that the chairs of committees don't all meet with all of CLT at the moment. We meet with our individual directors, and the only time that we're going to meet as a group, I think, is for the Ellie's shaking his head. But I thought for the business planning bit, we would be meeting as a group. But somebody is going to correct me on that element.
Thank you. Emma.
Oh. Thank you. In terms of the structure of the format, well, I have slavishly followed the SIPFA set out. I don't think it's going to be problematic to swap it around, and more than happy to do that. Just done it in terms of the SIPFA guidance and what they've how they've laid out their template, really, Councillor Wilson. But more than, it does make a bit more sense to do it that way. So I think that's a sensible amendment, and certainly I'll clarify the meeting with the chairs in the annual governance statement, so that's clear. But it does relate to last year, of course. So different arrangements were in place for last year as opposed to what is happening since the election.
Thank you, Emma. Chief Executive.
Chair, I think the latter point, Emma may well have clarified what I was going to say. Of course, this is a retrospective look, and therefore the previous arrangements were that the corporate leadership team met with all service and policy committee chairs and vice chairs, not simply on business planning and budget, but on an ongoing basis. Those arrangements for the forthcoming year are still under review with the leader of the council, but my expectation is that we will have a chairs and corporate leadership team meeting on an ongoing basis, separate to discussions around business planning and budget. That's to enable chairs for service and policy committees to be more broadly cited on council policy issues and other matters of key political sensitivity, which is normal practice and is certainly something that when we previously had an external review undertaken by the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny was strongly recommended, as well as being something the 2021 Corporate Peer Challenge of the Council recommended we put in place. So we will be doing that again. It's been simply a matter of post-election logistics, planning and confirming who was going to be in which group. So that will be something that will be reinstated properly now we're through the first cycle of committees. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Graham.
Yeah, no, I think that's very helpful, and it sounds very sensible to me as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I do note that paragraph 13.6 about local government reorganisation is quite short. I anticipate that that is going to get significantly longer as time goes on. What's happened in 24-25 is just the start of a process which will get bigger, larger, more expensive, but also will eventually impact the council in its decision making. I don't know if you'd just care to expand on that, Chief Executive, because it is something which is going to be quite all-consuming by the time we get to 27-8.
Thank you, Chair. As you know, this is one of my absolute favourite subjects, and indeed yours as well. We spend a large proportion of our respective time in this in different ways. Yes, this will have an ongoing impact, and particularly for 27-28 onwards, which is when we assume shadow authorities would be created for the new unitary councils. At that point, government will have laid structural change orders, which will also include things like Section 24 provisions, which means that key threshold decisions on financial and other matters will have to be referred to the shadow authorities, shadow executive, rather than simply being decisions held in the control of the existing constituent councils that we have now. A good example of that would have been in the case of neighbours in Northamptonshire some time ago. Key decision thresholds were set at £100,000, and all of those decisions were required to be made by the shadow authorities on recommendation from individual councils. So if we follow a similar model in due course in Cambridgeshire, of course that will have a significant impact on both governance, decision making, and dare I say, Chair, timescale for decision making, which will be challenging for both the districts, the county and the city councils, I would suggest. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's something for us all to look forward to. Right, so we are being asked to agree that the draft annual governance statement, which is at Appendix 1, is consistent with the committee's own perspective on internal control within the organisation, and the definition of significant governance control issues, which are noted in paragraph 2.2, and also to delegate authority to the Service Director, Legal and Governance, and to the Monitoring Officer to make minor alterations in consultation with the Chair and the Vice Chair of the Audit and Accounts Committee. Those in favour, please show. Those against? That's agreed by a majority. Thank you very much indeed. We may now move on to agenda item 9, which is the KPMG audit plan for Cambridgeshire Pension Fund 24-25. Emma Larkham will introduce the report on behalf of KPMG. Emma.
Lovely, thank you, Chair. So this is just presented really more, it's been to the Pension Funds Committee already, but this is for completeness coming to the Audit Committee as well. So just as the summary of the work that we do over the pension fund. So you've previously had the plan that we would do for the council accounts, but this is just setting out what we've got for the pension fund. So I'll just take you through a couple of the key pages. So on page 3 of our document, which is, do it on the main pack for you. Page 455 of the combined pack just sets out the materiality levels there to what we'll be testing to. So £48 million materiality, which will test down to 36 million, and any misstatements above 2.4 million will be reported back to the committee through our reporting at year end. And then just in terms of the significant risk areas, these are consistent with what we've seen previously in the last year. So firstly, you've got the management override of control risk, which is set out on page 6 of my report, or 458 of the combined pack. Management override of control is the one that's on every single audit that we see, and is sort of looking at journal controls, any key estimates, sort of recognising that position that management are in to be able to manipulate if they so wished. And so we'll do our normal procedures there. There is no heightened risk for the pension fund, but it's just the risk that we see on all audits. And then the other significant risk is just around the valuation of the Cambridgeshire and Counties Bank. So this was an area we obviously looked at last year as our first year as the auditors, and continues to have that sort of heightened risk. We bring in our corporate finance team to help us sort of review that valuation model that's been provided, and make sure that we're comfortable with all of the various assumptions feeding into that model. The other pages set out sort of our other areas of risk, which is around the valuation of the investments, but we don't see those as heightened. We're just noting those here for as other audit risks that we'll focus in. The rest of the report sort of sets out some of our mandatory communications to you, and in the appendix sets out the audit timeline, so which with the work being completed over the summer, and then sets out the fees set by the PSAA and the confirmation of our independence as your auditors. So that was all I was going to say. Happy to have any questions.
That's very much appreciated, Emma. Questions from members? I saw Graham first.
Thank you. Every year we have this debate about the Cambridge and Counties Bank. I noticed the valuation has gone up from 84.8 million last year to 102.7 million in 31st of March 2025. That seems quite a big increase in just 1 year. And are we comfortable that that is such a large amount of money? And what are the auditors going to do to really get to grips with that amount?
This is a quite unusual asset class for a pension fund. Michael, would you care to comment on this first, and then we'll hear what the auditors have to say?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I opted to come in first, if I may, because obviously at this stage, this is a statement of accounts that has been presented to external audit as signed off by myself. So assurance around this has been sought from third-party valuations. The actual range of the valuation, we have gone for the middle range. This was an audit recommendation from last year's KPMG's findings. So we have provided evidence that sits behind that in terms of that external valuation. I have been through it with the pensions team, and therefore, obviously, we're now in a period where KPMG will undertake their due diligence and will report back to both the pension committee and this committee.
Thank you. Emma, would you care to expand on that, please?
Oh, certainly. So as Michael said, the authority has its own expert, so we will assess that expert to see whether we think that that's a sensible route to have gone down. That you've got somebody who is credible in terms of being able to provide that estimation. And then what we do as an audit team is recognising that we are a normal auditor. We don't necessarily have that expertise. We identify the expertise that we've got within KPMG. So in this instance, from our corporate finance team, to come in and sort of review that model and say, actually, are those assumptions that are being used appropriate? Do we agree with the valuation methodology? And it's not necessarily that we will come up with a, yes, we're 100% aligned in terms of all of that, but saying, are we, happy with the approach? Are we happy that materially we are aligned in terms of that approach? So it's a not dissimilar approach that you see us using for, valuation of lands and buildings or on the pensions liabilities. The real key for us is making sure that we have challenged those underlying assumptions, that they are reasonable and within a reasonable range.
Graham. Good, thank you. Councillor Poulton.
It's just a question of information. I'd never come across Cambridge and Counties Bank, and I wonder why we own a bank.
I think that might actually be outside the scope of what we are doing here, which is to look at the valuations and look at the audit which is going to take place. Let's just say it's historical, that we've got it for historical reasons. It is something which is regularly challenged at the pension committee, and correctly so. But I think that we'd be going into just history here in terms of explaining that. Our job is to make sure that things are being properly audited, and also that any valuation is subject to any impairment that there may be. Good. Just one question. I think this is mainly for the Section 151 officer, I think. The triennial reevaluation of contributions falls within this period, effectively, if I'm correct, or I've got my year wrong.
Sorry, through you, Chair. Year out.
Year out. Good. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Right, any other questions? Oh, sorry, Councillor Fane.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I may be following up Chris Fulton's question. A number of us here are new to some of these things, hopefully within your rules, Chair.
Thank you.
The Cambridge and Counties Bank is, I think, owned jointly by the pension fund and by Trinity Hall, and I'm just wondering whether the percentage ownership of those two owners might change, or whether that is fixed.
Well, anything might change, and I do know that there have been discussions, but I do know that the perspective of our pension fund is quite different from the perspective of the college. Again, we are in danger of getting into the area of a service committee and what they have to consider, rather than necessarily what we're looking at in terms of audit, valuation, and making sure that that part of the process is correct. It's a very valid question, but I can assure you it has been asked in a more appropriate forum, and I'm sure will continue to be asked on an annual basis in the other forum. Thank you. Right. So the report recommendations, we're being asked to note the audit plan of the Cambridgeshire Pension Fund for 24/5 and note the presentation which has been made by KPMG. Those in favour, please show of noting. And that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed, members. Right, we may now move on to agenda item 10, the Executive Director's Assurance Report, Strategy and Partnerships Directorate. Sue Grace is on leave, unfortunately, so the report will be introduced by Lisa Riddle, who's the Service Director for Communities, Libraries and Skills. Lisa.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Councillor. And yes, Sue sends her apologies today from leave. So I'm here to present the Strategy and Partnerships Directorate Assurance Report. This is an information-only report for noting by the committee, and its purpose is to provide assurance to the committee that sound internal controls are in place and operating effectively across the Directorate. I'm going to take you through key areas of the report, and I will begin with section 3, which details highlights of work completed from the last annual governance statement action plan. So the key points for you to note are the completion of strategic commander training for on-call officers, which was exceeded by the introduction of training and deployment of an additional pool of tactical officers who are now also part of our emergency planning on-call rota. The introduction and implementation of the Our Future Council change strategy and related system change boards, and that was adopted in October 2024 and is further strengthened by the council-wide change board, which is chaired by our Chief Executive. The approval and introduction of the performance framework, which was also taken to committee in October last year, and the Local Government Association Communications Health Check was completed and changes implemented as a result under the leadership of our new Communications Head of Service. Section 4 of the report demonstrates how strategy and partnerships contributes to the Council's overall control environment. And some key examples from Section 4 include the role of the programme team and head of change in ensuring robust tracking of work across the change portfolios, the role of the Executive Director in leading the target operating model portfolio, and the role of our Human Resources Directorate, for example, in relating to health and safety and workforce reporting. Section 5 of the report details outstanding audit actions which belong to the Directorate and of which there are 5 in total. These relate to electronic records and direct payments. And finally, Section 6 of the report covers whistleblowing complaints and inspections. Just to confirm that the Directorate received no whistleblowing disclosures during this period, and the report breaks down our complaints by Stage 1, Stage 2 and Stage 3. The report also contains information relating to the inspection of Cambridgeshire Skills, whereby the service received a good overall rating with one area outstanding, and that was from Ofsted, and also the outcome of our annual Prevent Duty Home Office assurance visit. And again, this was a positive outcome with us receiving an outcome of exceeding in all areas. And the appendices that accompany the paper provide further breakdown on the audits and inspections, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Lisa, and it's an excellent report. Right, members, questions and comments, please. Graham.
So one quick comment and one question. First of all, can I congratulate the team on getting the very positive reactions from the inspections? And I think we should record that if we could. And then the second question is related to the emergency command arrangements. Having worked for decades with the Environment Agency, I'm aware how devastating flooding can be. And I just want to be absolutely clear about the responsibilities that the County Council has, its arrangements for strategic and tactical commanders, and how they are staffed. So our directors briefed on what their responsibilities should be and how will it all work and come the next flood, because there will be a big flood soon at some stage.
Thank you, Graham. Lisa.
Thank you for the question. Yes, is the answer to that. So we have a gold and a silver command structure in place, and the gold command officers receive training which includes the roles of the county council versus the district council. So, for example, in something like a flood situation, we're very clear about what sits within our Place and Sustainability Directorate and the teams that can pull together around that, including our communications, and also what sits with somebody like a district council, for example, if we had to set up rest centres. We've then got a tactical group, which are our silver command as well, who they will really lead on the operations. And we've also got a group called the Local Resilience Forum that brings together partners from fire and rescue, police, districts and county, where we plan together for these eventualities. So yes, we've got thorough processes and systems in place for that. And if an emergency was called, it would be those groups that come together to create a plan to respond to that risk.
Thank you, Lisa. Graham? Fine. Any other comments or questions to be asked on this agenda item? Well, we've been asked to consider the assurance provided over the adequacy of the Council's control environment and compliance with corporate governance controls, which we have done. I'm required under standing orders, given that we've now been talking for 2 hours, or some of us have been talking, that we now need to have a short break. So I will suspend the meeting for 5 minutes until 4:10, and we will resume at 4:10. Thank you. Mishendo, are we okay to restart? Councillor Unidas has said that he might be late coming back. He just needs to stretch his legs a little bit more. Oh, Councillor Fay. Okay, we'll wait just a few more moments then. Just give it one more minute and then we will start again. Well, we will continue now. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you, members. We haven't got too much further to go, I'm pleased to say. The next item, item 11, is the Executive Director's Assurance Report for Finance and Resources. And Michael Hudson, you'd kindly introduce this report. No, you're welcome to do it from here.
Thank you, Chair. I should have thought about that in the break. So the paper is before you. It's similar to, well, it's exactly the same lines as has been set by my colleague exec directors, and as was set out by Lisa in the last item. Some points to note, though. Of course, as the Section 151 officer, that statutory role, I actually have some personal responsibilities over and above, and I've set those out in the report. There are 4 principal areas: finance, procurement, property, customer and digital services, and I would add the pension fund. Within the finance and procurement area, there are constitutional provisions and controls that are guided in terms of there. And clearly a strong control environment is needed and is recognised through both the audit of the accounts and internal audit of a large part of the internal audit plan, which I will come on to in a minute. We have continued to strengthen those controls, including the introduction of a financial transparency panel throughout the year, as well as an hour conversations target for our colleagues. And committee will be aware that there is a procurement annual report that is due in September. Clearly around property, a large focus there is around health and safety, and a number of the indicators are reported to the Asset and Procurement Committee for check and challenge within that. Customer and digital services. The digital services operates underneath the public services network accreditation, something that was secured about 18 months ago. We continue to review that, be audited, and have cybersecurity measures alongside that. And then pensions, we are the lead authority for the Cambridge Pension Fund, and I am the treasurer to that fund. So one of the things that we do recognise is that Tom Kelly, my Deputy Section 151 officer, when dealing with matters between the pension fund and the county council, Tom takes on those Section 151 responsibilities for the county council to avoid any conflicts of interest. Members will note, in referring to the previous item, in terms of internal audit recommendations, there are a number of outstanding recommendations over 12 months within this directorate, some of those arising from the shared ERP system with West North Hants and their management of this, some of which has been down to other improvements needed. For example, the debt work that has also been reported to committee. And finally, we note there no whistleblowing, but we do note for customer services, we do quite frequently receive stage 1 and sometimes stage 2 applications around, in particular, Blue Badge. But happy to pause there, Chair, and take any questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Michael. Members, any questions or comments on this report, please? Graham first.
Thank you, Michael. Are there any common issues in the Blue Badge complaints that you can recall that we should be aware of? Is one question. And then the second question is, what other improvements and weaknesses do you see in your directorate at the moment that we should be aware of? I'm a bit concerned. We've had papers in the past about debt recovery, and that always seems to be a big issue that we are still, in my view, not quite on top of. And Ricky has referred a number of times today to this land. So are there other topics that we are missing that we should be aware of?
Yes, just dealing with that one first of all. The directorate, as with my peers, is always looking at in terms of continual improvement, and we are challenged and pushed in terms of that. Clearly, we also have things like local government reorganisation and key support and advice around that. So we are looking and stretching our work around that. So the key risk is one of capacity with the volume of work that we have to deal with. So we are looking at what we can invest, particularly around corporate finance. We do have opportunities around digital, and we have, as part of the our Future Council programme, we have the Digital Data and Technology programme, which is looking at improvements around our systems and solutions and use of our data. Again, that is on a business case basis and should be showing elements of return, even if that's one-to-one in the initial stages because of some of the complexity, but hopefully a greater than one-for-one return. So we are working through that within the change programme. In relation to the first part on the Blue Badges, it is solely down to where people disagree with the outcome and go through the process to challenge that.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson? Fine, good. Councillor Fane.
Chair, I hesitate to ask this in public, and I would expect a response to be very general. At paragraph 410, there is a reference to peer review on the question of cybersecurity. And it seems to me this has become much more important recently. Some of us have been astonished to see the figures from Marks and Spencer's, okay, a commercial organisation. I'm just wondering whether, in awaiting the outcome of the peer review, there are other measures that need to be taken to ensure that our system is fully resilient.
Thank you.
I'm pleased to say through you, Chair, that the LGA review has happened. We have the draft findings only recently, and we are working through those, and I will take that through the appropriate governance, including officers and reporting back to committee. We will be updating, for example, our cyber strategy as a result of that. As you would expect with any peer inspection, there are a number of things there that we welcome in terms of improvement, but we have also continued in terms of the cyber strategy action plan to implement a number of processes, and some of those have landed alongside the peer review. So we will be giving an update to Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee.
Are you satisfied with that, Councillor Payne?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. That's more than I think Chief Executive may want to.
Yes, Chief Executive.
Very briefly, Chair, I'm agreeing with everything Michael said because I've been privy to the work of the peer challenge on cybersecurity. Just to also reassure members, if I take you back to the earlier item on risk management, cybersecurity is properly covered in the Council's corporate risk register as well. Clearly, we don't go into details, as Councillor Thames rightly pointed out, but nonetheless, there are confidential appendices that we have previously shared with members of this committee and strategy, resources and performance, and we will continue to take the necessary steps to protect the data and information in this Council's control. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Executive. And I'd like to thank you for organising in the last few days, including today, that all members of the Audit and Accounts Committee have had sight of a very interesting national paper which has been produced. I say paper, it's 136 pages long, which contains some really interesting things about cybersecurity in terms of both chronic and acute risk. And it's certainly something I believe everyone should have received it by now. And it's certainly something which I would encourage all members to read, even if only in small chunks, because there is a hefty amount of information there, and it is very densely written, but it's not technically written, I'm pleased to say. So I would encourage you all to read that at your leisure. Just one question I have, if I may, Michael, and that is to do, well, a control environment isn't just there to make sure that any non-compliance is identified. It's there to try to ensure that we change things so that non-compliance becomes less likely. And I'm surprised about the extent to which there are still failures of compliance in procurement in terms of the number of non-compliances which there are. Are we having difficulty in reducing the amount of non-compliance in procurement, or is there a background amount of non-compliance which we just have to live with?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one of the things to point out is we've been open and transparent in terms of our improvement journey. That dates back a number of years now from PDO, I think, external audit opinions or value for money comments. So we have put considerable effort into that and into training. I think there is still some way to go, and it's Asset and Procurement Committee, sorry. I attend that many committees, I just need to work out which one. Do receive regular updates in terms of that progression. So good progress. The team, the procurement and commercial team have put strong controls and strong reporting in place, but what that does in itself is it identifies the areas of weakness. We need to know that so that we can improve, and we'll continue to challenge the organisation and make sure that we are moving in the right direction.
Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions on this? Right, we've been asked to consider the assurance provided over the adequacy of the Council's control environment and compliance with corporate governance controls, which we have done. Move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 12, the committee agenda plan. Do committee members have any questions or comments? And one thing I'd particularly invite members to consider is that we've now received assurance reports from all the executive directors. So do we want to consider continuing this practice? And if so, who do we want to see in the next few meetings? Any comments or questions for anyone? Chief Executive.
Chair, if you'll permit me, subject to the feedback from members, obviously, I would recommend you continue with that process. What I would imagine you would want to do is exactly the same process, which is we schedule each of the executive directors to submit their updates to Audit and Accounts Committee throughout the course of the year. We started with the executive director for Adults Health and Commissioning under the previous Audit and Accounts Committee. My suggestion, therefore, would be obviously to follow up again with said individual so that we follow the same sequence, and that way you have the same gap between reporting each time if you are minded to continue to receive these. The other comment I would make, which is something I'll pick up with the head of internal audit, we'll look to further strengthen the contents of the director's assurance statements. This was the first year with that template. We have opportunities to further enhance based on the questions and feedback from members as well. I hope that's helpful. Thank you, Chair.
Extremely helpful, thank you. And I think it makes a great deal of sense to follow the same sequence that we had before. And it's been really valuable to be able to do this because we've been able to explore areas which haven't come up in regular agenda items previously. And part of what we need to do is to have a view of the whole system. And if we split that down by directorates and then able to question it on the basis of each directorate, it actually allows us to raise issues which are may otherwise not come before this committee. So I think subject to the views of anyone in the committee that we should do that, unless someone feels particularly urgent that one particular item, one particular directorate comes before any of the others, having the same sequence as we had this year, I think makes a great deal of sense. Good. Any other comments about our agenda plan? So we're being, oh, sorry, Councillor Fane, my apologies.
May, given the issues that have been raised today, including in public questions, I wonder where responsibility for subsidiary companies might come within these reports and when that might be approached.
Thank you. Well, responsibility for subsidiary companies is a function of a specific subcommittee which has only just been set up, which specifically relates to that. So far as audit and accounts is concerned, however, we still have an overriding responsibility to assure ourselves that what is happening is correct. And rather than look at that in terms of an executive director report, and I'm looking at officers here to see if they would agree, I think that it would be no harm at all in us having a report from the point of view of audit and accounts of where we are with, and I'll mention the one in particular, this Land Limited, which I think is the one which has been of most concern to most people. Certainly it's the largest value. I have my concerns, as many members know, about Opus Recruitment and Opus Solutions Limited. But in terms of value, this Land Limited is very significant indeed. So without us infringing upon the work of the subcommittee, because that's for the service committee to do, as far as our work in audit and accounts, if Section 151 officer, if you think it might be helpful to have a report.
I think through you, Chair, you'll have a report by its nature through the external audit findings. So we will report back at that point. I think that is the critical thing coming out from me today in terms of we have been through the accounting code with advisors. We have had the report that you saw before you. We now work with external audit, and they will report their independent findings back to this committee to consider. So we will pick this up, be it at the November or February committee. I know the backstop is February, but we would like to do that sooner, but there will be that point.
Given the size of the item concerned and the degree of contention involved, it just may well be that we need to provide greater amount of time than we normally would for that agenda item, because I cannot imagine but that this item is going to come up again, and we'll have quite a bit more to discuss than we have at the moment once the audit is completed and once we see what the auditor has to say. Emma, did you want to say a few words?
All I was just going to say is that we have already started looking at this, so clearly recognising it is a very significant point. So whilst we may not have concluded by November, I would hope we were in a position to at least give an update as to where we've got to at that point, so we can start to flag for the committee. So it's already, I've got a call about it tomorrow.
That's extremely helpful. Thank you, Emma. And of course, I must emphasize that is an independent external auditor's report, which has the greatest value in that is that it is independent. So is that satisfactory, Peter?
Yes. Graham.
Oh, Graham, sorry, Graham.
I think Ricky wants to get in on this as well, but and if I can just remind folk that Mairead mentioned that a internal audit review of the governance of this land is planned for Q2 of this year. So it would be good to get the results of that reported back to this committee as well at the same time.
I think that's really useful, but let's again emphasize what we're talking about is an internal audit report on our relationship with this land limited, rather than an internal audit report on this land limited. And it's vitally important that we get that distinction clear in everything that we say. Otherwise, there will be unreasonable expectations or incorrect expectations raised in what it is that we as an Audit and Accounts Committee in CCC is meant to do. Vicky, did you want to have a word?
No, I think that was covered. I think you've all brought up the points I was going to bring up, so thank you for that. No, that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicky. Any other comments from anyone? No, good. Well, so we're being asked to note the agenda plan together with those comments which have been made today. So thank you very much indeed for that. Item 13 is the committee training plan. Now, do any members have any comments or questions about this? Training is always very, very difficult indeed, because we're talking about people who are, some people have had many, many years experience in audit and accounts committees. For others, it's entirely new. And it really is important that people feel fully able to participate in the discussions that we have. Graham.
Well, exactly that. And I feel that the officers have put on a lot of training for us, and we should, at the very least, attend that training or watch it online afterwards. And I'm not clear at the moment how we ensure that everybody gets that opportunity. So I would like to hear back from Stephen or whoever how we go about doing that. Thank you.
Stephen?
Brief comment, Chair. For member training sessions as part of member induction, of course, we record the attendance of members at all of those sessions, so we know exactly which members have been in attendance and which haven't. We also record most of those sessions so that the content is maintained and accessible by all members at a later date on the County Council, through the County Council's intranet. I think we have a specific site from memory for elected members. Rashenda's nodding at me, thank goodness, because Democratic Services obviously maintain that. For ongoing training sessions and briefing sessions, we can also continue to do that. I'm very mindful, however, Chair, that we don't necessarily record each and every training session. Some of those are clearly confidential and subject to the usual provisions that we would undertake. But I think for those members that require other in-depth briefing, we are intending to reintroduce during the course of this year something that I probably remember from a very long time ago, which was the ongoing member briefing programme, which will be open to all county councillors once a month, will be via Teams, so members do not have to physically be present, will be recorded, and will cover 2 or 3 key policy areas, each time led by a relevant service or executive director. That will be an opportunity for members to gain ongoing updates and briefing, which I think is important. I recognise in response to Councillor Wilson, we've put an extensive amount of work into induction training and briefing sessions for new members, particularly since the election. But as Councillor Bowden's right to point out, even those members who are very experienced and have returned following the elections, there is no substitute for continuous professional development using the opportunities afforded to members. I am also advised that we actually record who has accessed the training through the Council's web intranet system, so we keep a full record of member training, and of course, if my memory serves, we're required to publish that on the Council's website as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And as I recall, those member briefings used to take place on a Friday because there were fewer clashes on a Friday than any other day. And personally, I think that's probably still appropriate. If it were up to me, we'd have it on a Saturday or Sunday, but unfortunately, these matters are not up to me. Councillor Fane.
Chair, I just wanted to say that I found the briefing notes, I wasn't able to attend this session, on an understanding of the accounts extremely helpful, and that sort of training much appreciated. However, I fully intend to remain a non-expert layman in these matters. I will not just to compensate for the expertise of the chair, but I think it's important that we are not and do not seek to become experts. We rely on the expertise around this table, and I shall continue to do so.
That is much appreciated. And whilst we will continue to rely on the expertise of our officers, it's our job also to challenge. And I know that officers do not object to challenge because it's an appropriate part of what we're here to do. Right, any other comments? Then we're just being asked to note the training plan. Thank you very much indeed. And that concludes today's business. Sorry, I'm about 20 minutes late. The committee will meet next on the 28th of November, and I declare the meeting closed. Thank you all very much for your attendance and participation.
Just 20 minutes.
I was further behind than that at one point.
Did well.
And I need to sign some accounts. Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you, Stephen.
Peter.